And we're live. Welcome everybody to Digitales episode 13. And today we have the very, very talented Asim Abbasi, who was a banker, continues to be a banker, but now is a director by profession and by choice. How are you doing, Asim?
I'm good. I'm good. You'll confuse people. I'm not a banker anymore.
You're a director, and you've directed a really hit show these days called Chirels.
Yeah.
So help me connect the dots. A guy who did banking back in the day, went to LSC, spent like a number of years in that field,
Yeah.
suddenly gets up one day and says, "You know what? I'm done with this. I'm going to make content."
Yeah. So I think it's look, it's something that I feel like I've had inside me for a while. I remember trying to, write a play in school and get my friends together. I remember doing radio plays on
Mm-hmm.
when I was like, 8, 9 years old. So I think wo कीड़ा था कुछ मगर it was suppressed because of course, I was leaving grammar school in 98, at which
Okay.
point, there's no concept of, at least then there wasn't, of doing media, of doing film, of doing anything
There
that
wasn't.
the sciences or liberal arts at most, but not so much.
Right.
So economics, I was good at it. I'd done it for GCSEs and then A levels. So kind of just fell into that and did it and went to LSE and just did what was expected of me for a very long time.
Right.
And then of course
Right.
you become an investment banker at 21 and you have a big fat paycheck and you're like
Yeah.
suddenly, okay, I'm suddenly rich when I'm 21. How's
Yeah.
that possible? And then you kind of, and they, it kind of, I tried to leave a few times, but something always came up. 3 years down, I was really determined I was going to leave, and my MD decided that he wanted to send me to New York. So I was like, oh, okay, fine, 1 year in New York, not bad. I had a lot of,
Golden handcuffs. Golden handcuffs.
yes, exactly. So I think a lot of that happened, and kind of years merged, and just I was what I would do sometimes, at least in the early years.
Mm-hmm.
I would work for 14 to 16 hours and banking hours, and then I would
Right.
come home and I'd still try and write for like an hour or 2 hours before going to sleep. So I
Wow.
think that thing was always there. Once I took a like a month of sabbatical, right, during
Okay.
my associate level, and I went and did like a week of filmmaking course. So I think that I kept going back to it. It just took me a really long time to figure out that this could be a profession. What I enjoyed could be something that I could do for a living. I think that took a very long time. So 10 years, and
But what was the trigger? Like, I mean, after 10 years, I mean, there must have been some trigger event that said, you know what, this is the segue to break away from these golden handcuffs.
I think two triggers perhaps. One was from a work perspective. Technology had gone down. 2007 crash had happened. I'm talking 2010. I was still employed, but TMT was dissolving, and they were saying, "Hey, do you
Right.
want to like migrate to UK M&A? Do you want to go to another group or something?" And I was like, "If I'm really changing, do I want to stay at Citi? Do I want to keep doing banking?" And I had gotten married, so I think my wife was very
Okay.
supportive and kind of knew that I had wanted to do something creative for a while. So she was nudging me. She was saying, "Go do what you've got to do, make yourself happy." And
So
then,
the wife is the trigger, as
yes,
always.
the wife is the trick, in a good way, in a very good way.
In a good way.
And so she kind of convinced me to have that conversation with my mother, who's the one
Okay.
who says something and it goes
So
for
the
me
wife's
anyway.
the trigger and the mother's the challenge.
Yes. So the trigger pushed me to the challenge, and I spoke to the challenge, and challenge said, "Okay, fine, you can go make one film."
Right.
And I was like, "Sure, I'll make one film," and then that
Okay.
film was Cake.
Okay.
And kind of, so she oscillates. She's very proud in moments when something comes out, and then she's still like, "But you could have been an MD right now." So I
Right.
think she's always oscillating. And I keep telling her, I was like, "It's never gonna happen. I'm never ever going back to banking." But I think
Right.
somehow she still believes that I will someday. So
Well, all mothers have this view, right? And so they think, school se pad ke economics paro, banking ho, linear path ho, continuous progression ho. Problem with media is it's not linear.
exactly,
It's art. Art can be a hit or a miss.
yeah,
And so it's difficult for sort of, I guess, our parents and the environment we come from to understand that. But you managed to make it work, and your first production was Cake. How did you end up with that script or that concept and decided that, you know what, this is going to be my first piece?
I think it was, so I had written what we call spec scripts. I had been writing, obviously, because I had left banking in 2010. And since then, I went to SOAS, where I did film theory. And then I went to London Film Academy, where I did a practical filmmaking course. Then I started doing a lot of short films.
So you actually studied, like you actually spent time away from work and studied full time.
Yes. So I left work. And the first thing I did was I left work when I had gotten my admission at SOAS, and I did my master's there, which was in film. It was more theoretical, but it was great because I had never, again, linear path economics. You're only studying economics, and especially if you study in the UK. Unlike in the US, where you can do a minor in something, you're only then for those 3 years at LSE, I was only studying economics. So I think what masters really allowed me to do was, I was studying philosophy, I was studying psychoanalysis, I was studying, representation of gender in film. So a lot broader, and it was opening my mind up, and I was studying a lot more cinema in terms of non-Hindi, non-Hollywood cinema, which was Japanese cinema, Iranian cinema, Korean cinema. So I think that kind of really broadened my horizons and the type of work that I wanted to do. So I think that's where that kind of journey began. And then I did short films for a while because I was trying to learn the craft. And the first one was horrendous, the second one was bad, but not so bad. Then the third one became better, got into a festival, fourth one got into a festival. So I think that's how that happened. And then I had written spec scripts. I was trying to make a feature film in the UK, but that went around through a lot of, fun. You have to apply for film funds in the UK. You have to get some kind of a financial support, some distribution support, and it was just a very long game. And I did it for 2-3 years, and I was like, no, I can't not make a feature film. I think that was the time that I was also realizing that the Pakistani industry was suddenly picking up. We had multiplexes everywhere. People had started going back to cinemas. There was a new, cinema going culture that had been destroyed in the 80s. So I think
that was picking back up. But what's interesting is that you'd been away though for almost what it sounds like 14 years or 13 years by this time, right?
But I had been away, yes.
So and then you went to SOAS and you studied film, and you're seeing all sorts of film from around the world. Why at that point did you say, "Nahi, maine bas Pakistan ko represent karna hai, wahan karna hai"? Why not just continue on abroad and create content for the foreign market?
To be honest, it started off as a very, very selfish reason where I was I saw opportunity in Pakistan. I saw opportunity because it was not a saturated market like UK was. It also allowed me, my parents were aging. It also allowed me to spend more time with my parents, who I was entering that personally. I was entering that phase where I was really missing Pakistan. I think you develop that in your 30s when you've been away for a long time. That connection that I had not missed in my 20s at all. Suddenly I started missing, and I wanted to spend more time, and I started enjoying everything that I hated before, including the load.
Because you've been away for it for so long. Once you come and spend time here, you're going to not miss it.
I actually am. Well, this time around, I was like glad I'm leaving for a while now.
See?
But I can do long stretches, which I couldn't do before. So I don't know where I was. So
you picked Pakistan because you had that longing for home and the family.
Longing for home, also more opportunity. I felt like I could get traction there. So I wrote the script of Cake, and it was a very personal story. I was at that time dealing with aging parents. I think for a long time it doesn't hit you that your parents are growing old, and then suddenly, I don't know, it's like it hits you at one point. At least that's how it happened with me. So they were obviously always progressing towards their 70s, 80s. But it just hit me one day that, wow, they're suddenly very, very old. And then my father had a heart attack. So I was spending a lot of time in the hospital, and that's where I was writing most of Cake.
And so that was like a trigger event, maybe, that heart attack just kind of cemented the fact that, all right, they've moved on in age. And now it's real.
And so I kind of want, and so a lot of that, obviously, my protagonists are female, but there's a lot of like the personality trait of Siraj's character that's played by Ahmed Saab was very close to my father. Same thing with the mother's character, which was played by Beo, was close to my mother. So I had borrowed from personal life, and it was something that was very honest and authentic to me. but it was also
Mm-hmm.
something that, in hindsight, was relatively safe. And I felt
Mm-hmm.
like it was, I wanted to make it quick. I did not want to be, and again, it was not quick. I went to TV channels and they all shut doors on me because they,
Right.
what is this? There's no item song, there's no girl dancing around. What
Right.
are we going to do with this? But I was
And
lucky enough to find, I had some savings of my own which I used for the film, and I was lucky enough to find Zulfi Bukhari, who was my producer.
mhm.
And he funded it. He brought the distributors. He did the deal with B4U in the UK. So then, and also I had thought that it would be a very, very small indie low budget film. I think what really turned it around was like when people like Amna and Sanam and Adnan, all said yes to doing it,
Mhm.
for not a whole lot of money.
Mhm.
Because of their face value and everything, it just became a bigger project. And then I think there was a heavy marketing push that again Zulfi was in charge of, especially in the UK. So Cake ended up becoming this big film, and of course it was received well.
Right.
But even pre-release, I think that hype was created. So there was a lot of, and again, we didn't see that many people in smaller cities or single screen cinemas watching it. I always say this, like Capri, I think, played it for one
Right.
week because they wanted to give the shows to Baghi, which was releasing the same day, which is the Tiger Shroff film.
But did you keep your audience in mind? I mean, so you had your sort of script in mind. Did you ever think that, you know what, when I'm going to make content like this that doesn't have that mass appeal, I
Yeah.
might have the doors shut on me and that it's not for that audience? I mean, how did you think about your audience when you were creating this content?
I think look, I'm very clear about what I cannot do, which is, you know what? The thing is that I feel like if I had started making films in my 20s, I would have made song and dances. I would have done Bollywood. I would have done a Karan Johar type of film, and I would have been very open to it. Because for 10 years I felt separated from it. When I finally
Right.
got to it, it felt like I was entering it so late that now everything that I did had to have meaning. And
Okay.
hence I was very clear that I cannot do films that I do not believe in. I cannot do films. I also really honestly, I thought it was only with Cake, but even with Churels, I am approaching all these projects as this is the last opportunity I'm going to get to make something. So I feel like I need to be as honest to myself and as authentic, and I need to not have something that is just time pass. I want it to have some kind of a cathartic afterlife. And I think that became really important to me. And I thought Cake could do that. So that was the starting point. And then I knew it would cater to an urban audience. I knew
Right.
the slow burn. It was, it didn't have a very defined plot. It was like you enter these characters in their lives and then you leave them. So I was aware of that, but I was counting on the fact that within the urban crowd it would do well, and it kind of did. Like at Newplex, for example, in Karachi, it played for weeks, and it was packed for a long time. And but again, as I told you, Capri it didn't, and internationally, again, it was, it's all a learning curve. It did really well in US and Canada, because I
Right.
feel like US and I feel like the diaspora there is slightly different from the UK diaspora. I in
Mhm.
hindsight believe that perhaps the UK diaspora is slightly more conservative, and is slightly more tuned to more mainstream cinema. So
Plus, I think you would also have the Indian audience be willing to come in and view Pakistani content. I think that you wouldn't just be restricted to the Pakistani audience because
yeah,
your content had a little bit of wider appeal.
yes,
It was South Asian content,
yes,
to say.
yeah. So
But
so that
but the
that's how I
commercial, from a
felt.
commercial viability
Yeah,
standpoint, did you
yeah,
ever, when you created that content, did you ever put numbers? I mean, you're a banker, that's what I'm
yes,
asking,
yeah,
right? We would, and having spent time in that career path,
yeah,
everything is numbers, everything
yeah,
needs to have value.
yeah,
Value accretive was the word I remember we used to
yeah,
use all the time.
yeah.
Did you look at this creation of, let's say, Cake as a value accretive transaction to you from a
No,
profitability, cash profitability?
no, I looked at it as a value neutral. and
Okay.
and that Zulfi was aware of as well, and everyone was aware of that. We did not want to make a loss. We did not want to
Right.
be, under, but we knew that it was a risk, and we would be okay if we just recoup the money that we had spent on it. And that's what
Right.
ended up happening. And I had to put a leash on, because I think when you come to marketing, everyone wants to just,
Yeah.
wanted to just go big. And I was like, no, we need to
Yeah.
come back to what we had agreed, and we can't go more than this. But luckily, we I think, we had good line producers. It was budgeted well. It was shot on time. There were no extra days done. We didn't go over budget. with Cake. I
That's
think,
amazing.
yeah. So I think that because we were very strict in terms of what we could spend, and we knew that anything more than that was entering kind of risky territory.
So tell me this. Now you've made your first feature film. When you were creating this film and you were working on this project, did anything you learned from your banking days actually help you with this?
Oh, I think everything. I feel like
Because they're two completely different career paths, right? I mean, they're
I
completely
know.
different.
It's okay. So first thing that I have become really well, it was drilled in our head was attention to detail, right? The
Mhm.
way we used to pitch ideas, like even a footnote could not have a
Yeah,
full stop missing. You know,
correct.
so though like I can like look at a page and I can see if there's an extra gap between two words in 1 second.
Right.
So all of those, so but they might seem like very small, minute things, but they kind of build up, and it kind of it has an effect where it channels down. So now it's
Hmm.
impacted my ADs. All the ADs that I work with are also like that. And they
Hmm.
in the future train interns, they're also going to be like that. So I think that attention to detail became a really, really important thing. And that I think I learned from banking. Also just we used to work crazy hours. And even though I think
Yes.
with age, I probably don't have the capacity to do those hours, I can still work a lot. And when I'm
Right.
committed, I just have to kind of deliver, even though there's no client here.
Right.
There was always the fear of the client. You could not disappoint the client.
Yes.
Now I am the client and I'm the worker, but it's, I cannot disappoint myself. In the case of Churels, for example, there was this constant fear that I would not live up to Z5's, expectations.
So,
And that
so in that case, you did have a client, right?
in
In
that case, I
Jarrell's
did have a
case,
client. In that
but
case,
in Cake's case, you were doing this independent project on your own, and you yourself were your own client. And so,
yeah,
driving yourself, because with banking, you always have that sword over your head
yeah,
someone's holding,
yeah,
right? It's your MD, or it's your VP,
yeah,
or it's your associate,
yeah,
or it's the client.
yeah,
But Cake was your first project out on your own, and
yeah.
did you have to figure out a way to keep yourself driven and motivated because there was no one else pushing you?
No, because I think it was also make or break now. It was also, I
Right.
waited so many years for this moment to get my first
Right.
feature film made. And
And that created the drive right there.
that created the drive. I could not possibly fail. The
Right.
challenge, the mother was watching.
Yeah, that's true. So their mother was the client then.
Yeah, there's always someone you're trying to please.
So you created Cake. It saw commercial success in the US. It was a different script coming out of Pakistan, and you mentioned that this caught the attention of Z5, and that's how the whole Churels thing began. How did that happen?
So
Walk me through that.
I believe that I know they reached out and they asked to because it had not released in India, and if I remember correctly, it had not had its Netflix premiere by then. So there was this limbo period where you couldn't access the film, and they asked for like a private screener, which I sent them. And then they had seen it and they liked it a lot, and they said pitch some ideas to us, and I was like, "Okay, I'll pitch some ideas." I did on the onset set. I was like, "Okay, if it's like normal television drama, I think they're much better writers and directors who do the traditional stuff. I'm not suited for it because at that time I had gotten a couple of TV offers that I had refused because I felt
Right.
I was not going to fit into that mold, and I thought maybe this would turn out to be that too.
And that these were like your standard mainstream television
Standard
dramas, like
mainstream
which are
television.
then.
I was given the script. The scripts were not bad, to be honest, but I just felt like TV works very fast. I had just made one film. I was used to doing 3 pages of script in a day. We took our time. We rehearsed. We paid attention to every single detail. You suddenly move to television where it's a race against time, and you're trying to do pages and pages and pages of script in a day. And there's no variety. There's a shot, reverse shot of people sitting in a bedroom. There's no art. It just doesn't appeal to me, that kind of storytelling. So they said, no, that's fine. You pitch to us whatever you want to pitch to us. So I pitched a couple of ideas, and one of them was Churels, which they liked. And on the basis of that, I wrote the pilot script and what we call the series Bible, which is like a 10-episode summary. And that went out, and on the basis of that, they commissioned the project.
And so, how did the concept come into your mind of Churel? I mean, you mentioned Cake. It had to do with your parents and that sort of coming to realize their age and so on,
Yeah.
and it was real and authentic. But Churel's is completely different. You know what I mean?
So
How did this link up with your life experiences?
I think there are multiple reasons why it was Churels. I think there. there are a lot of filmmakers who want to leave a very specific trademark. I don't think I am one of those. I think I want to keep reinventing myself. I want to keep changing. I want to keep, I don't necessarily, of course, there is something inbuilt. So even today, people can say, oh, we see a similarity between Cake and Churels, but I never set out to give that similarity. For me, I wanted my second project to be vastly different from my first project. I've also grown up in a household of women. I have lots of sisters. I don't have any brothers. My father was a very gentle soul. He was, very kind, down to earth. I didn't grow up with any, alpha role models. My mom was the more dominating one, and my father always allowed it and cherished the fact that she was dominating. So I think that kind of environment, I was always drawn to women's stories, and I was drawn to stories that were not typically covered by television. I had not grown up or seen oppressed women, and even if I had seen that they had been subjugated to some kind of a patriarchal, gender biased mindset, they had the willingness to stand up, or someone had the willingness to stand up. So I was like, why? And that someone didn't necessarily have to be a man. And that's what I kept seeing on television. It was, damsel in distress, even if she's doing well for herself, will eventually need a man to rescue her. That is the standard trope, because I understand why it is. It works, it gets you the ratings. It is palatable. Audience keeps consuming it. They do. So I think that was surrounded by women, and then these were themes that I was toying with for a long time. I've always been fascinated by the idea of colorism that exists within our community, within South Asia. It's like this kind of a colonial hangover where we have this brown Saab mentality, where we look up to whiteness and we shy away from blackness. And I think that was something that I really wanted to address. And I was sick and tired of seeing all those fairness cream ads that I saw on television. And I also just wanted to, address this power dynamic of a man versus a woman, and how those gender biases are formed. Are they formed through our nurturing? Is it through the parents? How do we educate our sons to be better? And more importantly, for this particular thing, how female rage works, and how it can sometimes lead to like a positive outcome of the sisterhood and Bhenchara and all these women coming together, or it can cloud your judgments as well, as we see in some of the episodes where people make wrong decisions and their consequences for it. So I feel like all of these things, and this 10 episode or whatever episodes I wanted, it was like a long form. There were no restrictions. You wanted 30-minute episodes, or 60-minute episode, or a 75-minute episode, I was allowed to do it. I wanted 5 episode, 10 episode, 15 episode, whatever I wanted. So I think that's why it was so sprawling, and I felt like that kind of really worked in what I was trying to address through the show.
And so what was interesting is in some of and I got a chance to watch all of it, and I found it was very interesting. The cinematography was a little bit like, let's say, Sacred Games meets Made in Heaven.
Okay.
But it was very nice to see, at least that was my opinion, very nice to see sort of Karachi, where it seemed to be shot, and in a light like this, shot like this, presented like this. But there were some scenes, that, were they there intentionally to present, let's say, our society differently? Like, for example, there was a scene with the character, I think it was Meher Banu, sitting in a dhaba with the police guy having chai, and I don't think, exactly, Nimrat's character, right? Yeah. And so I don't think that's not something you normally see, okay? You don't see कि यार एक औरत जो है ढाबे में बैठ के चाय पी रही होगी पुलिस वालों के साथ, or let's say there was a couple of scenes where there were, let's say, women dressed in jeans in environments that you would never see jeans in. You know what I mean? So living here, you're tuned a certain way, and you kind of challenge that stereotype. Was that intentional?
It was. I think that there are two things to it. Firstly, I feel like with this specific example, the dhaba thing, I think we had built Nimra's character to not care about any single thing. And I think that's what, from a story point of view, justified her just taking a rickshaw and meeting him, and it didn't matter. Or being alone in a dhaba surrounded by men in the last episode, and it didn't matter. But what we were always aiming for was an otherworldly quality to this. It was this world, but not of this world. And that, again, from cinematography onwards, it was mine and Mo's rule was always 80% real, 20% hyper real.
Mm,
Okay,
got it.
that 20% was always there. You'll see it in the lighting, you'll see it in the streaks of blue light and magenta light coming into the places where it shouldn't be coming in. You'll see it in the production design. There was, in all elements, in terms of storytelling as well. Because for me, there was an element of fantasy, that
Right.
and a very strong element of fantasy, because I mean, where are the Churels? They're not here yet in real life.
Right.
I don't
Right.
see a near future where there will be a Churels. I wish there was. So there was a hopeful, fantastical quality of, okay, it is this Karachi, but it's also not this Karachi. And I think we were very
Right.
aware of that, and I think that was inbuilt in the narrative and the design elements and the cinematography.
And even with let's say the secret society concept and the
Yeah.
masks, I
Yeah.
mean, what were you alluding to? What was in your mind? How did that come into this?
So
You could have presented it any way, right? You could have presented it in many different ways that
Yeah.
probably happen in our society.
Yeah. Again, there was an element of fantastical there. I wanted it to be surreal. I think there were lots of things. I think the idea of men being animalistic, the idea of women being treated as meat, which is, again, there's a lot of meat references as you'd see throughout the show. The idea of subverting fairy tales, so there was a reference to Sleeping Beauty, Beauty and the Beast, Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf. So all of those, and how those stories are always designed about this woman seeking help, needing to be rescued, and then becoming a princess, or then coming, so I feel like there was a lot of those references that I wanted to kind of play around with. The masks just kind of worked. I was like, without mask, it probably happens. I don't think it happens in Pakistan with masks, but that was, again, that 20% creative liberty that I was telling you about.
And in this project, was there ever a time you felt, you know what, I'm stuck, I'm jammed, you were in that pickle of a situation, कि यार ये कैसे होगा, इसके बाद मतलब मैं फंस गया हूँ. Did you ever have that feeling, and how did you get out? I'm sure it was every day.
Every single day for 4 months. Not मैं फंस गया हूँ, maybe मैं फंस गया हूँ, मैं कैसे निकलूंगा. I think that is because it was mammoth. We are shooting in summer heat. We are shooting for 4 months. We have 100 plus locations. We have 50 plus actors. We have 20 people's arcs, character journeys to be thinking about. Thematically, we are covering a lot of bases. So I feel like it just felt like a challenge every day, and every day it felt like I was failing. I was failing myself, and I was failing Z5, and that it would not turn out to be the way I had imagined it. So yeah, I think my 4 months was, and I was looking through BTS pictures, and there's not a single picture of me smiling. I was like, I want to post something where I'm happy on the set, and I'm never happy. And everyone knew that I was never happy, and I was only happy once it was done, and I was sitting in the edit, and I was like, I tell you, it kind of works. But that's true. But I was never fearful of whether this will work or not. I think that was the beauty of having someone like Z5 and Shailja in particular, kind of guiding me, holding my hand and saying, do what you've got to do. I had never felt, Cake was just mine. It was not someone else putting their love and faith in me and saying, go do it, and do it the way you want to do it, and have a vision and have a voice. And, so that felt very nice, but also felt like I had to live up to that expectation, and I had to work extra hard to make sure that I was not disappointing. But there was no fear of how the audience will take it. There was no fear of whether, because again, it was for digital. How do you measure whether it's done well? How people are talking. There's no box office concept. There's no concept.
Right, there isn't. I mean, you could look at views within the platform. I mean, and do you have, maybe there's an indication of that? Do you get a chance to look at the stats?
No, I do not. I don't know any figures, but I know that they're happy. I keep saying that
there's a lot of talkability. There's a lot of press. There's a lot.
There's a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of coverage. It's been critiqued well mostly. So I think that is all a positive for Z5.
So you think there's a season 2 in the pipeline where they're back together?
You know what? 2 months ago I would have said absolutely not. Right now I'm like, maybe, but not anytime soon. Not anytime soon. I need to recover. I need to perhaps live another life apart from Churels, and then perhaps come back to it.
And so you're gonna, so you've done, let's say, a long sort of, you've done a series of no, a feature, and
Yeah,
you've done this series, right? In
yeah.
a sense, what are the differences? TV versus film, or digital, long form content versus the short form episodic content.
You know, I think I gravitate more towards ensemble writing. And I think long form is just really good to explore all of the characters and explore their backstories and give like full justice to them. And also you work outside restrictions, right? That's always, I'm talking about digital. Within
Hmm.
cinema and TV, at least locally, there are lots and lots of restrictions and censor board considerations and and immediate return considerations. So when there are immediate return considerations, uh, your financiers are, they would want stars, they would want a dance, they would want everything that is considered, they would want comedy, they, all the things that are considered as drivers for audiences. Digital says, oh, audiences change, things change,
Right.
and there's no one type of audience. We want to diversify our portfolio, we want all sorts of content, and we don't care if they're watching it in the first week or they're watching it a year after. So I think
Hmm.
that flexibility that digital brings is really exciting for me. And frankly, I don't know where cinema is going right now. We have suffered drastically because of the cinema, because of Indian films being shut down. And
Hmm.
that is why most people used to go to watch films in
But
Pakistan.
isn't that an opportunity? I mean, if that
It's
is, I
not an
mean,
opportunity
Indian
because
films not being there, like, allows you to create content and just create it on the cheap.
no, because you see, this is kind of a culture. It's like going to a bar. It's like
Right.
uh, there's a communal aspect to it. You take your family out, it's an outing. You need to rebuild that culture. We were in the process of rebuilding that culture because that culture had completely destroyed. We're not talking about 60s where where everyone wanted to go to
Mm-hmm.
the cinema and Pakistani films were booming and stuff. We're talking about a new post Zia environment,
Mm-hmm.
where post Islamization, where cinema was considered bad, music was considered bad. So that culture needs time. Yes, in 5-10 years time, with a lot of Indian content driving those people into the cinemas, and that increased exhibition leading to more production of domestic content, that would have eventually provided the opportunity. You cannot cut the life source of what the exhibitors needed, what the cinemas needed, and say that a local content will compensate for it. A local content will start compensating for it when the quality goes up and when there are 50 to 100 films being made, not 10 films being made in a year.
So let me ask you this. I mean, is it a quality issue, or if you, let's say, put your banking hat on for a second and you say, you know what, I'll make all the financing available that's possible. Anyone who wants to make a film this year can make a film. State is going to sponsor it, government funding aa jayegi. As long as your script meets in certain criteria, you can make a film. And let's say
Yeah,
your films are made between, let's say, 10 and 30 million rupees, right? You suddenly have created a ton of content.
yeah,
Okay, and now you've inundated these cinemas with that content. You
yeah.
think that people won't show up if that's not of good quality? I mean, time pass bhi to chahiye na yahan pe. You need variety of
But they
entertainment.
won't, because you have Netflix at your access disposal. You have Amazon Prime at your disposal. You are now uh, focused on international content. You don't watch content as in, and no one really cares if it's just Pakistani content. We want good content. Everyone just wants good content. And if you're getting that on Netflix, Amazon, you're getting it on digital, you'll only go to the cinema if it's actually serving a purpose. If it's, you've word of mouth, or there's good hype about it, or good reviews about it, something has to work. And if you take care of, like, this infinite amount of money that we were talking about, the hypothetical situation, it kind of only really works if some of it is non-recoupable. So it needs to come from funds set up by government. You see, what happens is when every single dollar is has to be recouped, at least in
Mm-hmm.
the early years, you get the producers get panicky. They're like, अच्छा पैसे बनाने, पैसे कैसे बनते हैं? पैसे
Mm-hmm.
गाने और नाच से बनते हैं, एक बहुत हाई इंस्टाग्राम फॉलोइंग ऑफ एन एक्ट्रेस से बनते हैं.
Mm-hmm.
The creative business is very weird and it doesn't work on a formula. But counterintuitively, you keep going back to that formula because you're worried you'll never make the money back. So it keeps going in circle. You're trying to replicate. So you'll look at an Indian film that's done really well, and you'll say, "Oh, that film did well. Let's try and copy it." It won't work. It won't work because there's no excitement, creativity coming through, shining through, and that is an intangible thing that kind of connects the audience with you. Your voice has to be there. Most of these filmmakers do not, I hate to say it, have a voice, and the ones that have a voice are considered film festival directors or filmmakers who are now applying to film funds internationally to kind of recognition, or do it that way because they know that local markets are not going to serve them well, or they're doing it using their own money, like Sarma did with Zindagi Tamasha, which still hasn't seen the light of day. So I feel like it's a very complicated market. I think government needs to step in. I think censor board restrictions need to be limited. There needs to be a proper rating system where it can't be that everything is either you go and watch it with your toddler or it's banned. We need to find middle grounds. We need to have 15 plus stuff. We need to have 18 plus stuff. There needs to be a fully functioning infrastructure that has to be supported by government, and the government cannot cow down every time someone.
Well, you have access. One of your old producers is currently in government. I mean, you currently have
I have tried
one of the most important guys in this.
I have, and I have mentioned a film policy. He is kind of looking into it, but he seems to be very thinly stretched, my friend, since he's in government. And I think once you go into government, you need to, I don't know how the priorities work, but I think there's a lot to prioritize. It perhaps doesn't come up really high in that priority list. But yes, someone like him and other people
because I think the film one is an easy one, right? Everyone sees the big name actors, directors, but there is, when you look at film production, a lot of people forget that there is a lot of unskilled labor that is used in film, right? The gophers, the runaround guys, the cameramen, the spot boys, all these guys. These is all employment opportunities. Reviving a film industry revives and creates employment for unskilled labor. And absolutely. I think that if that mindset is inculcated, technically it's an industry, that you can really drive and develop.
Yeah, and it's not fully recognized as an industry. There's no, there has to be a union for these day workers. There has to be a fully functioning industry, like you said. And I think it needs that government support. And same thing goes not just with film, also digital. I mean, right now, Zee came and gave us an opportunity to do this show, which employed hundreds of people in Pakistan and generated income for hundreds of people in Pakistan.
So an Indian entity creating employment in Pakistan.
Yeah. So where is your platform? And you can't expect a filmmaker or 5 filmmakers to come up with a platform. You need sustained support from the TV gang, the big bosses sitting at televisions, and also from government and any kind of support from the ministry. So it's very short-sighted to just be thinking about your own films and to be only thinking about your own TV channel and not working together as an industry, because profitability khali short term to nahi hai na. If you want to make this an industry, you need to think about profitability in 10 years time, 20 years time. You can't just be thinking about your next Eid release.
That's true. I think everyone needs to look at it as a pie, a bigger pie, even if it's a smaller slice. It's better than having a small cupcake on your own.
Absolutely.
You've been through this journey, and I'm going to start winding up now. You've been through this journey, starting, let's say, 98, LSE, then SOAS, the banking experience, a feature film, Chirels. What is the learning you would want to share in terms of, you've literally picked 2 career paths that are polar opposites to each other. If there's someone who's someone who's at the same junction in their life that you were in 98.
Yeah.
The mother's saying, yaar, jaake economics karo, ya accounting padho, ya jaake, engineer bano. What would you say? Yaar, maa ki baat sun lo, 10 saal ke liye, phir jo karna hai kar lo, or would you give him some other advice?
I wish there was an easy answer that applied to all. I think it really depends on circumstances. For me personally, all my 20s, I said, I wish I had just had the courage to go to my mother and say, I want to do film. But now when my 30s came and when I was actually doing film, I was so glad that I had done banking. I had a roof over my head. I had a mortgage. I had savings that I could use to make short films. All of that came through banking. So I would be lying if I said that those 10 years did not help me. they also, the skills that I learned were really, really useful. But I would say that it's never too late. I mean, that really stands. I changed career paths in my 30. People are settling down by the time that they're 30, and I was, on to becoming a pauper and not earning a dime for years, and relying on savings, and hand out for my dad occasionally. And it's not a good feeling to have in your 30s, because especially when you've seen so much money in your 20s. But there's a soul satisfaction that comes with it, and
Right.
at some point you need to prioritize that. And I feel like, but in today's time, I think what is really exciting and different from when we were young is that the opportunities people are more aware of. There are more
Mhm.
filmmakers out there. It's a legitimate industry. We are making content, uh, you know and people see that, and young people see that. And I think those courses are more, people are now can go for a BFA, MFA to a university and not think twice, that they're
Right.
not doing economics or not becoming a doctor or whatever. Also, technology. There are iPhones, there are, your Android phones. You can be making stuff. Some really, really good films have been shot on iPhones. You need to have an eye, you need to have a vision. So find your voice firstly, however long that takes. And finding that voice involves living a full life. It involves having those experiences, because whatever story you tell, even if it's vastly different from your life, like I did with Churels, it relied heavily on finding that emotional connect that tied it to my own life, how, in whatever metaphorical, symbolic way. So I think having those uh, life opportunities, exploiting them as much as you can, and then and just making content. I think the first 5-10 things that you make will be horrid, but then suddenly,
Mm.
you'll realize that you're discovering yourself, and you're discovering what you like to. And then film festivals, you make an excellent film, you go to a great film festival, you are that's a starting point. That's a starting point. It's
So,
not an easy industry, and it's going to be, like you were saying, it's not a trajectory, right? So
mhm.
the next project I do, if it doesn't do well, or if it's a bad project, or I've not thought about it properly, I'm back to ground zero. Everyone will know me from my last project. Everyone will forget that I once did a cake or a trail.
You, right. That's true. You're only as good as your last project. And
Yeah,
that's the problem with this industry. I
yeah,
mean, I think that's good advice that the fact around trial and error. Well, first of all, secure yourself financially. I think
yeah,
that's a good piece of advice. I know it's difficult for some people because they just want to go and swing for the fences, but secure yourself financially. Life can be long.
yeah,
Trial and error. Some people forget that trial and error leads to perfection. I mean, think about the times that and how you learned how to ride a bike. How
yeah,
many times you fell, right? And I think that the last point around sort of not just taking from your life experiences. Some people just restrict
yeah.
themselves. But you've taken from a lot. And I think that if these three are combined, it allows people to really go out and experiment.
And
It
have a
sounds
thick
like.
skin. You're gonna have lots and lots of doors closed at you. I
Yeah.
did. Every TV channel in Pakistan has shut their door on me and said, "Sorry, you cannot
Right.
do." So,
That's
and I could have just sat in a room and cried and said, "I really can't do this," or I would have said,
right.
"Screw you, you don't know anything." So, and I didn't do that. So I
Well, this
think,
is good advice. This is good advice, Asim. Excellent. Thanks a lot for the time. I know
no,
we've
thank you
taken
for
up a
having me.
bunch of your time. Great chatting with you, and good
Yeah, you
luck
too.
with future projects. All the success to you, and get our name, the Pakistani name, out on all the digital platforms that you can.
Trying. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for
All right,
tuning
take
in,
care.
everyone.
All right,
Stay
bye bye.
tuned. Bye bye.